Hi, I'm Michelle Dixon. Welcome back to The Shattering Place, the podcast that explodes the myth of materialism, exploring the living science and true stories of multidimensionality in service to healing, awakening, and the evolution of consciousness. We've already looked at the cracks in materialism and the reality of multidimensionality. In episode 2, we looked at the body as a portal and somatic resonance as the biological interface through which we interact with the field. And then in episode 3, we considered the relational field and how, if our thoughts aren't private, this field matters as the primary architecture of our shared reality, one where our internal state becomes a collective responsibility. If you haven't yet listened to episodes 1 to 3, please do. Each episode builds on the last, and together they form a living map of multidimensional healing and transformation. In our last episode, we explored the glass mind, the reality that we are part of a collective broadcast. But once we realize that the walls of the private mind are an illusion, we are faced with a sobering new reality: responsibility. In the last episode, I explored this as the ethics of the situation, meaning that if we're all swimming in the same energetic sea, then my internal state is no longer a private matter. If I carry a frequency of bitterness, or if I remain gripped by ancestral trauma I refuse to look at, I'm effectively leaking that frequency into the shared field. I suggested that this is why perhaps awakening is not a self-indulgent hobby. It's a moral and ethical obligation. In a multidimensional world, healing is an act of planetary service. Today, we are continuing this journey. Today, the episode is The Lineage of Light, and in this episode, we are expanding the field from space to time, to the lineage. We must understand that we're not just broadcasting our own personal experiences. We are the terminal points for a multidimensional flow of trauma and wisdom traveling through our entire lineage. In today's episode, we will discover that by healing, say, a thought form from generations ago, we are literally altering the frequency of the current field, cleaning the upstream for the sake of the downstream. When you choose to embody the light of your lineage rather than its shadows, you fulfill, one could say, a moral responsibility to the whole field. You can become a clear transmission for the emergence of a new kind of human. To begin today, I'm going to start with a metaphor. I love a good metaphor. I'm going to begin by explaining how the past lives in the present by referring to the phantom limb effect. You probably have heard or are familiar with the phantom limb effect. This is the brain's insistence on the presence of an arm or a leg that has been physically removed, amputated. So in this situation, the nerves continue to fire. The sensation remains vivid. The pain might be agonizingly real despite the absence of a biological source. So I see a parallel phenomenon in the psyche. I am going to call it the phantom emotional resonance effect. This is the experience, for example, of carrying acute grief or paralyzing anxiety or even a specific phobia that has no biographical cause in your life. You can't look at your life family history and identify the source. You are living the symptoms of a story you never actually inhabited. You might have feelings that don't seem to belong to your timeline. They are possibly the echoes of a previous generation's unfinished business. Ancestral trauma, intergenerational trauma. In a multidimensional reality, we must recognize these phantom emotions as signals from the ancestral resonance field, notifying us of a frequency that's still broadcasting, waiting to be resolved, as it were. But before we dive into ancestors, we need to revisit morphic resonance, returning again into the work of Rupert Sheldrake, who defined it, before we circle back to the mechanics of epigenetics. And this is a shorter episode, but it packs a punch, so buckle your seatbelts. We're going to do a quick diversion into science before we get back to some clinical examples. So, let's talk about the morphic field of the family and the reality of how the blueprint of a lineage acts as a persistent frequency in our lives. So, remember Sheldrake's findings that I discussed in the last episode, episode 3? He suggests that every organized system, from a crystal to a colony of ants to a human family, is shaped by a specific field. This is a spatial blueprint containing the collective memory of all similar things that have existed before. These fields give shape to atoms, cells, even complex behaviors. Morphic resonance is the process by which information is transmitted across this field. It occurs based on similarity. So if a group of people learns a new skill or experiences a specific trauma, that information is broadcast into the species field. So Sheldrake uses this in the study of animal behavior, but we can apply it to humans, right? Future memories of the species then can tune into that information via resonance. This makes it easier for them to learn that skill, or conversely, leaves them more susceptible to a specific phantom frequency of trauma. I'm going to give you an example shortly. Sheldrake has actually documented this phenomenon extensively across more than 15 books and 100 peer-reviewed papers, detailing experiments ranging from the homing instincts of pigeons to the invisible communication between domestic pets and their owners. While the exhaustive dataset behind his work isn't the primary focus of the episode, the implications are. And again, I link some of his work in the show notes so you can investigate yourselves. In any case, if this field is real, and we're going to accept it as real, then a private struggle is never truly fully private. We're either reinforcing an old habit of the species or we're broadcasting a new possibility. And thus, Sheldrake's theory that a species remembers serves as a cautionary tale for all of humanity, right? If the very cells of our being hold the memory of past genocides, forced migrations, the foundational trauma of the Industrial Revolution, slavery, the systematic destruction of First Nations peoples, then we carry a species-level memory of catastrophe. If a change in a species adaptation in one part of the world translates into a transformation in another, then our collective past becomes a living weight. It's a weight, the burden we carry. I deeply respect the work of Resmaa Menakem in this area. He identifies the black body and the white body as sites of collective racialized trauma, and he offers some free courses in racialized trauma, which I highly recommend. Conventional science mirrors this. We see, for example, higher incidences of disease in specific groups. Due to this, we might call it intergenerational tax. For example, Black women, and I think these are American studies, statistically reach menopause earlier than women of other racial categories, which is a physiological response to a psychic inheritance of navigating the modern world, referring back to Resmaa Menakem and racialized trauma. This leads us to a vital question. What is the loudest collective trauma we experience? While we all share the collective memory of being human, we also carry specific genetic heritage, which is more impactful. This is where epigenetics enters. If you are a descendant of Holocaust survivors, you carry a unique layer of trauma. Research confirms that cortisol markers are altered for several generations in these lineages. In clinical work, in therapeutic contexts, we see this via the genogram. So the genogram is a strategy of mapping out someone's genetic history through memory, through a discussion of lived experience, and creating a map of, where in our family do we see substance abuse? How often do we see domestic violence? And mapping that as a genomic pattern. Patterns of sexual abuse or substance abuse do repeat themselves across generations, because the client holds an energetic memory of trauma they did not personally experience, yet it lives in the family pattern. We know this experientially, even if science doesn't always show us exactly how to prove that. But we can expand this beyond genetic memory. If our cells vibrate to a symphony or a requiem from the past, what if that music originates in past incarnations? So I'm talking about the transmigration of souls or reincarnation. In the modern era, research on past life memories has moved from Eastern metaphysical, kind of contemplative, traditional reality into Western inquiry. We have massive data sets that have been carried out by multiple institutes, but most notably Dr. Ian Stevenson and the University of Virginia, which has tracked thousands of children with spontaneous past life memories, and the data is incredibly compelling. You know, in my novel IKONA, reincarnation is a is part of the narrative. It's a narrative device. Nevertheless, I do not claim to understand the exact mechanics of time or incarnation. I have some personal ideas around it, but I can't really fully explain it. However, I take the experiential dimensions, seriously. So the experience for me trumps data. If someone holds a memory from another life that connects to a current paralyzing fear, that memory is a clinical reality that we have to take seriously. This is the groundwork of QHHT and past life regression therapy, pioneered originally by psychologists like Dr. Brian Weiss, again, linked in the show notes. The process of reliving a memory seems to free the body from holding it. When we enter a memory and we detonate the charge, the symptomatic response, so the fear and the pain, ceases, right? This is what we've learned from past life regression as a modality, that there's something about reliving a memory that seems to come from another incarnation that releases it. In any case, in my novel IKONA, this reckoning, this incarnational experience is central to the narrative. My hero, Finley, one of my four heroes, but Finley, one of them, he learns early on that his future incarnation is a man named Wallace. There is a direct psychic bridge between them. The actions of one life have a massive effect on the other life. Throughout the text, there are other future and past life connections, and there's some that are hidden in the some text that I haven't spelled out I haven't confirmed it in the novel as yes, this character is definitely a reincarnation of that one, but it's kind of obvious once you dip below the surface of the text. If you've read the book and identified those threads, I even invite you to message me privately with your theories. I can confirm them. As for ancestral and incarnational memory, I'm not going to share a huge number of examples from my therapeutic work in this episode. And the reason is that I'm planning on doing some episodes in season 2 with those who have personal lived experiences to share, which are much more impactful when we can discuss them as an episode. But for now, I do want to share 2 examples from my work that illustrate how ancestral memories and past life experiences manifest in the body. As a disclaimer, I will be referencing the reality of sexual abuse. I will not, however, go into any graphic detail, but simply state that that's what happened and that there were memories present. I won't describe the memories. So, years ago, first of all, I worked with a young woman who was plagued by what felt like memories of early childhood sexual abuse. She had no conscious recollection of an event, yet she carried a persistent suspicion that something had happened with her father. This was deeply puzzling to her because she maintained a warm and healthy relationship with him. The memory felt entirely disconnected from her biographical reality, yet it left her body heavy with shame and caused her to shut down in her intimate relationships. When the exploration of her own life yielded no clarity, I suggested she have a gentle conversation with her parents about their own childhood traumas. Now, obviously, a lot happened to get to this point, but I do sometimes advise clients to ask their parents, like, tell me about your childhood. And I suggest that they frame it with curiosity. I'm interested in your history, mom or dad. Is there anything that stands out from your early life that you've never shared? I encouraged this particular client to do this. And in this case, she did share with her father that she had a persistent feeling that something had happened in the family of origin, something in the family field that she didn't consciously know. She asked if he could shed any light. She didn't want to say it happened to me because she didn't want to alarm anyone in her family without understanding where this experience or this memory even came from. When she had this conversation with her father, though, he broke down in tears and he admitted that he had been sexually abused by someone in a religious organization as a young boy. Now, through that vulnerable conversation, my client realized that those phantom memories were not hers. She was exhibiting the symptoms of an unresolved trauma that her father had held but not resolved himself. Within weeks of this revelation, her intrusive memories ceased, and her intimacy issues also began to resolve. And this is a pattern I have witnessed many times. When a trauma remains unresolved in one generation, someone in a later generation may begin to carry the symptoms of that trauma. What we do not resolve in ourselves continues to broadcast into the field, particularly in the family field. This is why I think the work of Bert Hellinger with family constellation therapy is so powerful. It addresses the psychic inheritance of the family system. This modality operates on the principle that we are part of a living field where family members can subconsciously step into the roles of ancestors, kind of like a play drama, kind of like a drama therapy. But they can step into the roles of ancestors to balance unfinished business. By physically representing these family dynamics in a workshop setting, people can identify where the flow of love or energy has been blocked and consciously return the burden to its rightful place in the lineage. Another example from my work involves a middle-aged woman who experienced repeated vivid memories of extensive sexual violence across different historical periods. These memories were accompanied by a host of reproductive health issues. On the massage table, as she was resting and receiving body work, she would spontaneously enter into a semi-altered state of consciousness and describe these scenes as if she were watching a movie. I wasn't interested in proving the historical accuracy of these images. I took them as a genuine experiential dimension of her reality. We used bodywork as a way to somatically feel those sensations in a safe environment, allowing them to process and release. As the memories were integrated, her physical reproductive symptoms began to resolve. There is a clear conclusion to be drawn here. If we view the body as an intermediary between different layers of reality, we must accept that the story the body presents may not originate in this lifetime. Through the multidimensional field, time is folded into the space of the body. This isn't about digging in the past for the sake of it. And in fact, I always say, we don't go digging into the past. We start with the present, see what is alive in the present, and through that window, we might find ourselves in a past memory, but we don't have to go digging. Your body, your psyche naturally presents what it needs to present for healing to take place. So this is really about reclaiming your energy from a timeline that's kind of still leaking into the present. Everything that requires resolution will present itself in the here and now. My suggestion to both practitioners and clients is to just temporarily hold space for the possibility that the pain being experienced may not be from the here and now, even if current circumstances are activating it. A current trigger could create an emotional response, an affect, which has an origin in something much older, right? Often reaching a specific age, the same age that, say, an ancestor reached or a past incarnational self experienced a crisis, reaching that same age, that birth date, reaching the age, may act as a trigger for material to surface. I very often see that if a person had in utero trauma or they had trauma as a baby, then becoming a mother can bring that up as they are themselves going through birthing and being with an infant. It can bring to the surface their own experience from when they were that age. So similarly, I have seen someone can reach a certain age, when certain adult in the family experienced a trauma at age 15, then when that child reaches 15, they might, if it's not resolved, experience symptoms can be tracked through to that trauma. Whether through somatic release on a table or the drama therapy of family constellations, the goal is the same: to stop holding the trauma so that the symptoms can cease. So now let's talk about the evolutionary purpose of lineage healing and tie it to a potential planetary shift. I think we need to ask this: can we evolve as a species if we're weighted down by unresolved ghosts? If we take on board that we have a species level energy field with some form of memory, layered in with specific cultural, racial, regional experiences, and then possibly on top of this, we have past life imprints, you can see that there's an awful lot happening in any one body, but this complexity is precisely the opportunity for healing. As Rupert Sheldrake has pointed out in his work, when a species experiences an adaptation in one part of the world, that new behavior can spontaneously appear species-wide even without physical contact. Sheldrake famously used birds as an example, specifically birds called blue tits in the UK. In the early 20th century, a few of these birds learned how to pierce the foil caps of milk bottles delivered to doorsteps. So they would pierce these foil caps in order to get to the cream, right? And this was happening in the UK, but almost immediately birds of the same species across the country and eventually across Europe started to do the exact same thing. There was no way for them to teach each other across those vast distances, right? Instead, they'd accessed a new morphic habit that had become available in the collective field. To make this tangible for us, think of it this way. Each time you do the difficult, gritty work of facing an ancestral pattern, perhaps the legacy of silence, a cycle of scarcity, of course, and even more complex things like a cycle of substance abuse or physical or domestic violence. Each time you face it, you aren't just improving your own life, you are piercing the foil, as it were, for the rest of humanity. But, disclaimer, I want to be very, very careful here because I'm sometimes exasperated by the surface level comment that you chose this pain, so you should be the one to heal the family. There is a tiny, tiny seed of truth here, but the part that is truthful isn't the suggestion that you in any way deserve the trauma or that you shouldn't be upset because your situation has a higher purpose, right? After 15 years of working in the trauma space, I'm the first to tell you that when things are terrible, they're just terrible. What people experience can be incredibly upsetting and deeply impactful, and it's just not helpful to say to anyone, well, maybe you chose it. Now, if someone says to me, I think I chose it, they're certainly welcome to feel that way, but it's not something I will ever confirm. If that comes from you and that helps you, great. But I don't think it's helpful to see it that way. But there is a hopeful part of the scenario, and that is that the work you do, if and when you're able to do it, actually matters for the collective. It simply matters. When you clear your system, you are contributing to a cleaner family lineage going forward, and by extension, you're clearing the layers of a species level field. I am also not suggesting that everyone listening needs to run out and book a therapy session, right? Most people on the planet don't do conventional therapeutic work. The statistics on that are very clear. Access to this kind of support is often a privilege of a certain socioeconomic background, of course, right? As I look towards season three, which is the embodiment piece of it, when we begin discussing practical solutions to embody a paradigm shift, this is already on my mind. This access to therapy. I don't believe you necessarily have to have therapy in the traditional sense to participate in ancestral clearing. It would be wise for us to find ways to make this kind of healing facilitated by a community models that would be free or subsidized. Everyone should have access to the support they need to navigate their own internal landscape. It shouldn't be a matter of economic privilege. But for now, I want to leave you with this. Individual healing versus collective healing is to some extent a false binary, because when you clear your own stream, you are contributing to upstream. You are contributing to a cleaner planetary field. You are a node in a singular continent in the making. This brings us back to the ethics of resonance and the personal responsibility involved in our own clearing. If the field is like a shared library, then your healing is a new book you've written for the benefit of all. You are literally making the new human architecture easier for the person next to you to inhabit. So, we have seen today that we are the river itself. We have seen that we are part of a living flow of ancestral resonance where the past is constantly vibrating in our current selves. I've explained how, when we clear the stream of our lineage, we may very well be contributing to a species level evolution. In our next episode, episode 5, Future Memory, we move into the future. We look at what seem to be memories of the future that many people experience. We revisit the many worlds theory from physics from episode 1 and consider the reality of multiple timelines and the implications for choice points, asking what does it mean to choose a future both individually and collectively. I'll also share the past future resonance that's at the heart of my visionary novel IKONA and the moments in my own life where the future self reached back to guide the present. We're going to be really feeling into how to navigate a reality where linear time is an illusion and multidimensionality is a truth. We'll meet again soon at the edges of the known. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please follow and rate, or even better, review this podcast. And if you enjoyed my novel IKONA, please consider joining my free membership community at ikonathecommunity.com. All information is in the show notes. There you can access periodic group calls, some of my reflections, unpublished writing, and more to come. Just a quick word about working with me one-on-one. My local clinic remains my sanctuary for traditional grounded healing. That work is at capacity, however. In any case, it's committed to stabilization and baseline care. But for those of you who are ready to move beyond baseline into your true evolutionary mission, I'm opening a new door: the 90-day structural recalibration. This immersive partnership sits outside the clinical model, allowing me to bring my full multidimensional toolkit to your process. If you are ready to go further, details are in the show notes. Thanks, everyone, and we will meet again soon.